Well, Mark was going to say something.
Okay, so maybe we'll pass it from first Mark, and then we'll go to...
Okay, I just wanted to continue the thought that Bambu was talking about, that about what's next, and it shouldn't just be a regurgitation of all of these conversations, but expanding the conversation. Because I'll be honest with you, on a day-to-day basis, I don't do hip-hop. Yeah, actually, I'm a fan of it, but I'm also its worst critic. Okay? And every single time that I'm in the car with my kids, it's like I can see that generational gap and what they're into and what I used to be into. My record collection is vast, but it stops at probably the early 90s. Purposefully, because I'm not going to spend money on some stuff that I don't like. Now, of course, I started picking up his CDs,
I was gonna say
Blue
something
Scholars,
about
and
that.
all that. But I said my record collection. But this is a precedent of mine, and I'll buy that because I'm not Toronto. I'm still analog. I'm all vinyl. I'm not that great. But I a long time ago, I decided I'm just going to keep what I love, so that when I'm like 40 or 50 and my kids are driving me crazy, then I'll be able to put the headphones on. And now my kids stole my headphones and they're listening to their stuff. So, but the point I'm trying to make is this, is that people evolve. And I'd say that what hip-hop was for me was it helped me find myself, empower myself, and give me some set of tools so I could organize, mobilize my community. Now, I'm at a point where I think Africa Bambaataa, KRS-One, Chuck D, all we're talking about, fight the power, gaining some power for our community so that we can transform our communities. So we can transcend this identity as former colonized people or former slaves, right? So where I'm at is, what's next? Because I know what we are capable of, and now it's in print. So this book, the beauty of it is that it has documented it. We are now affirmed. All those questions we had as 12, 13, 14-year-olds when we were dabbling in all the elements was, do we even exist? Do we even matter? Well, we do. And now let's get over that, and let's find out what we're going to do with it.
Where do I go?
Candy?
Do I answer? New York?
Yeah.
My experience is also different in the fact that I come from, born and raised in New York. I can't speak on the current because I've been living in the West Coast the last 7 years. But my experience for the prior to that, the 31 years living in New York City, born and raised, very different. I also come from, I've been very blessed because I've been mentored by folks and pioneers of hip hop. I can honestly say Africa Bambaataa was one of my mentors. I can honestly say, and I was embraced by, I was around it, lived it. It was my life when even if you're supposedly not into hip hop, you know about hip hop in New York City. It's like, you're living in Queens too is different from other parts of New York City as well. And for me, my experience was just, loving music, being around music. My father collected records. I collected records because of that influence of my father. And then being mentored by folks within hip hop and understanding of my own identity didn't come till much later. And then even understanding how hip hop kind of took me back to my roots to understand my Philam roots as well. Because I didn't grow up with many Filipino Americans in New York City. I was hungry. I noticed that I was hungry to learn, and it took me having to seek out. It's so different than the West Coast back then. To see another Filipino American, to see another brown person, a brown Filipino, you had to seek out. We had to rely on the church groups to meet other Filipino youth. To have barrio fiestas, and this is kind of talked about in the book in my sister's chapter. She talks more about the barrio fiestas and how that was a way we came together. And honestly, if it wasn't for the promoter scene, we also need a New York City mobile DJ scene, because if it wasn't for the DJ scenes in New York City, many of us would have not met. We would have not met if it wasn't for the Philam promoters throwing parties in New York City and the DJs throwing those parties. DJs from Staten Island, from Jersey City, from Queens, from Brooklyn, and Manhattan, we would have never met had it not been for those parties. And then it evolved into a huge community. And even organizing was so different. We didn't have any organizations. I remember going to the Bay Area for the first time and went to an event, and everyone had their fists up in the air, and I was like, dang, I need to move to the West Coast, you know? And so even me becoming politicized took a lot of time. And it actually took me to LA, where I met Gabrielle Network, who were Gabnet at the time, to introduce me to Nanochka, who later then became one of my mentors at the time. So it took me coming out to the West Coast to kind of bring me closer to my roots, connect me, and it took hip hop to connect me to that. And then that understanding of who I am as hip hop is very much like Bambu's, that I am hip hop. I don't see it as something I shelve on a wall. I see it as who I am, that I wear it, sleep it, eat it as well. It's my life. Everything I do is hip hop. Everything I do, I can't stop loving it. And even as that's why I also think it's important to we do have those conversations within hip hop about how we're trying to save it. And there's museums coming up and honoring and a lot of that affirmation because of this capitalist structure that exists that does so much to erase it. That's why part of me really feels it's also important to quote unquote save it, but within that context to save ourselves in that context. So to me, it's when we're talking about how do we save hip hop, is how are we saving ourselves from this monstrosity of capitalism? That's how I see it, and in a larger context, because of the way hip hop has changed, and why do we see like a Step Up video who uses people of color as props and then have positions white people as the focus of a conversation. That's what I'm talking about when we say let's save hip hop, is because that's what happened. And you see conversations back from the early 80s with our pioneers, and the funny part about it all is that there's so much disruption and argument. Now I'm getting off topic, but it's such a like argumentation amongst our pioneers that you have our pioneers arguing with each other on the stories. And it makes me very, very sad. But what we don't realize that we're arguing, oh, whose truth is more important than the others, is that it's because of the cause of the capitalist structure that caused these divisions. So when we talk about that, when we're talking about hip hop, it's talking about saving ourselves from this capitalist structure. So that's my experience. I know I kind of went off topic, but that's also who I am and my politicized identity. Whenever I talk about hip hop, it means so much to me. It's personal, it's my life, and growing up in New York City kind of brought me to that, and here I am on the West Coast. I was in San Diego, now I live in the Bay Area 4 weeks only. So I got a lot to learn about the Bay Area.
Wait, you're in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I just moved there for a week. I know I have to get to call you, but I will, I promise. I haven't unpacked.
Sorry.
I haven't
New information for me.
We're having a moment here, folks.
Hip hop connected.
I haven't unpacked my boxes yet, and I have a lot to learn, and I learned so much about San Diego and how amazing like San Diego is, and so much I'm learning, and so much that I feel I can also bring back to New York, because I still claim New York City as my home and my life. I go off top of that.
I wanted to, Jeff, come back to the question you're asking, like, what do we do with these knowledges? And I think for me, what I always think about is the ways in which, because hip-hop, I think, really pushes us to think about, as you were saying during your opening remarks, that the local production of knowledge, and especially in a room here that we're speaking to the next generation of, hopefully, future documentarians and historians and journalists. I think it's so important that part of what the book does and what we should be inspired to think about doing from here is to collect more stories. I feel like so much of our knowledge it's mediated through through the national agenda, it's through the corporate agenda. Most of us probably grew up knowing much more about the founding of the nation in the 18th century than we know about our own family's immigration histories, or what brought us here, what shaped the communities we were in. And I'm not saying that the national history is not important, but it needs to be balanced with knowing about the local, about the familial, about the community. I think about this a lot within my own work. What started to me is I began researching the Filipino-American mobile DJ scene in the Bay Area in 2002. So I've been doing this for a dozen years now. It is, in my opinion, it's an amazing set of stories. It's an amazing history. I've told, or I've tried to tell, a sliver of it within there. You know, there's so many of these micro scenes that I think, you know, I was just listening to Mark talking about these twins. Like, I want to know who these twins were. Like, what was their story?
Yeah.
And you can find those kinds of things throughout anywhere you go. There's going to be all this local knowledge that right now it's inside of Mark's head and it's inside the heads of other people. We haven't figured out a way, or we haven't done enough to share that knowledge and those stories with other people so that we can be inspired by it, or at least aware that it's even out there. I was going to say, so I've been doing this for 12 years now, and I've always thought that this is such an amazing, rich set of topics. There's got to be other people who are interested in this, who are going to be coming out with other books and other things along those lines. In those 12 years, I'm still the only person I know who's worked on this. And on the one hand, on a professional level, that's great, because, yo, I got my territory. But I don't want that. I want there to be other people out there challenging and saying, look, you focus too much on SFDC. Where's all the San Jose and Stockton history? But I haven't met people doing that yet. And I find that really frustrating, especially within the context of a college campus, especially in the context of Asian American studies. And this is really no diss to anyone here who's an Asian American Lit scholar, you're really interested in Asian American Lit. We have so many people focusing on Asian American literature. We have so few people focusing on music, on film, on anything else besides basically Lit. I mean, again, I love Lit, that's great, fantastic, really important. But there's so much more in a culture. There's no book on Asian American car culture. How the fuck is that possible? That's insane to me. You know, that's, yeah. So I'm looking forward to Sean's book. I'm glad Empire Funk came out. I'm looking forward to everything else that's going to be out there. It doesn't have to just be academic. It can be journalistic. It can just be some stories that we tell each other. But in terms of what do we do with that local knowledge, is we go out and we use that to inspire ourselves to find more local knowledge. Because we need that balance. Anyway, that's rant over.
Yes. Nice rant. So, questions for our panel? Yes.
Hi, I'm Melvin. Go by Ben. Recent graduate of the University of Southern California, where I majored in ethnic studies, focusing on Pinoy studies, Filipino studies, as it intersects with Black music. And so this question is actually directed to the panel for anyone who has any information on it, bringing it back to the regional discourse that we're intended for this panel to be about. Not that the panel was bad or anything, I love it. But talking about LA specifically, and also bringing up this call to action, this theme of responding. And Sean, I know that you're working on like post-rebellion. So I'm wondering, I was born on the day of the riots, by the way. I met you at MKSR. But anyway, I'm wondering, what was the Filipino-American response in LA post-rebellion, this call to action? You know, you have this crazy thing going on in the city, but what were Filipinos involved in as far as bringing it back, bringing community together, and how was hip-hop intersected with all of that? I was a baby. I didn't know what was going on.
I wasn't. I can't remember. I think I was still in middle school, but I definitely took part in what people labeled as the riots. You know, we hit the Sears on Santa Monica, and I got hella dickies and porno movies for some reason. Like, we all had like hella porno movies. I don't know how that happened. And Michael Jordan's playground video. So, you know what's funny is that I listen to a lot of Ice Cube. Like, that's how I always quote him. Death Certificate is like the you know, when I die, that's what I want played, you know, at my funeral, that whole album front to back. Because I always say that album, if folks had listened to that album, you would have known the riots were coming, the rebellion was coming. Every aspect of that, from Black Korea to every piece of that became the bubble to what happened. So folks who were already there, which I was one of them, we knew it was coming. We knew something was going to happen. We could feel it in the air, whether it be an all-out gang war, whether it be, we knew something in the air was tricky, was weird. After that, being that my base was the Watts district of LA, which is where the truce happened. That's where it popped off. And I hated Watts growing up. I was the Chinese kid, you know, everybody was laughing at me because they thought my grandmother was Mexican, so they put us in the Mexican projects. Literally, that's what they called it. Not El Salvadoran, I'm not trying to, they literally called it that they thought she was Mexican. They used that verbiage. And so we got stuck in this pocket, this small community, and afterwards I happened to be there on the ground floor of this grand truce that happened, which people debate on how long it actually lasted. From my vantage point, it lasted maybe a week. But, you know, I was there at the bottom of that. So as far as Filipinos me being able to travel because our gang wasn't necessarily in that pocket of the flatlands. We had to go to Cerritos, La Puente, West Covina. And after that, I mean, we weren't part of the whole troops. That was more of a black gang thing. It got worse for us regionally. That's when, our OGs, Redmatic was doing drive-bys to Stevie B. Like, they listened to a different kind of music, so it gave a different kind of feel, I guess, to LA for the Filipino community. It got bad for us right after right when you were born. I mean, it was, for the Filipino community, those who know, that's when folks were getting deported, folks were going to jail. Folks are just coming home now, that I grew up with. They're just coming home right now. Hopper from STS, from Cerritos, he's just getting out. He just got out. And so my point is that regionally at the time, in our communities, it didn't, not until like the late 90s, maybe 98, that we just stopped coming out of that because of the deportations, because of getting sent away and going to jail. So the air in LA, as far as the Filipino community, especially in Echo Park, a historic Filipino town, there were like 20 gangs in 2 blocks. You know what I mean? So it really bubbled up after the riots. And it was, a different experience for us. And I'm glad you asked that question. Versus you talk to somebody in the black community, they have a different experience post-riots. Our experience was, okay, now it's our turn. Like they're done with their beef. So the Summer Madness of 1995, most folks don't know about that. That's where Asian boys went to war with everybody. And I remember that summer of 95, everybody at pool halls, like waiting, because we knew something was happening. All these little videos, if you Google people getting popped, there's like a famous video of a guy running out of Andy's Billiards popped. I was there, like I was a kid, but I was there. Like those kind of things are part of our story regionally. And hip hop just happened to be there the whole time, but it wasn't central. Right. So it's a great question. It just wasn't central. Like I said, our OGs were listening to freestyle music and still being as violent, which I don't understand how that happened. I get it with hip hop, it's so aggressive, but I don't know how the OGs did it.
Yeah. So I just want to throw this out there because I think what Bam is sharing is pretty critical relative to the Philadelphia experience, at least in Southern Cali. It might be the same for the Bay Area. But when you're 11, 12, before you're about to hit middle school, right? Back then, early 80s, late 70s, you had 2 possible pathways, right? First day of school, I was asked to get jumped into STS Cerritos. Okay. Marlene Ibarra.
You didn't do it?
I didn't do it. I didn't do it because I knew my dad was going to be home from his band school at 4. And but Marlene Ibarra, who's STS Cerritos, right? Yep. I just said it there. Yep. Okay. Marlon was also part of the Philippians, one of the baddest popping crews in town. And the Philippines also had a mobile DJ crew called Sound Productions. That's the Biscocho brothers and the Samsa brothers. Which eventually became United Kingdom, which is how Rhett and I are connected also. So for young Filipino boys, they had 2 paths to choose. And oftentimes, we chose both. So one of the reasons why I stayed in touch with hip hop was because I was really curious about what Bambaataa was doing with the Universal Zulu Nation relative to the black space, right? And how they could emerge from the South Bronx, something beautiful, this amazing culture. And when I was going to UCLA, I felt like I could go one of 2 paths. I could just say, F my community, I made it. Or I could use my experience to figure out how I could serve the people. That's why when Sean threw up SIPA up there, I spent more of my time in P-Town than on the West Side. I knew the West Side was not my community. I knew that I needed to be in the community. So when April 29, 1992, when you were born, hit, I was a part of the progressive student movement at UCLA. But at the same time, I was part of a greater hip-hop movement in our community because just a few months before that, January 1992, on page 184, 85 of the book, we were able to do what we couldn't imagine. For Red, myself, folks in the United Kingdom, the folks from Cerritos, our scene, our hip-hop scene, was always getting shut down, shot up, you name it. House parties to big hotel parties were getting shot up because between Carson and Cerritos, or West Covina and Cerritos, or LA and Cerritos, there were killings, all of our parties were getting messed up, but then because KRS One and BDP, they were talking about stop the violence. So if it wasn't for Red, in our local scene, he was the only one who was tuning us in to what was going on with positivity in hip-hop. So we decided to have this United Kingdom. Then we had this Unity Jam. And so we connected SIPASA, all the college organizations, and all the mobile DJ crews, and we said, squash it, this jam is not gonna get shot up. And then 4 months later, LA erupts. And so since I was a part of this progressive student movement, I was running for student body president at the time with an entire slate of people of color. It used to be called the Third World Coalition. Third World Coalition came out of the Chicano moratoriums and also the anti-apartheid movement at UCLA. These were all sons and daughters of South Central, East Los, right? Siblings who were in all the gangs, okay? But they happened to get into UCLA. And we all were trying to figure out how do we use up higher education in order to give it back to our community. But when it blew up, we all knew what we needed to do. And we had to get all of our brothers and sisters in the student power movement back home to Pico Union, to P-Town, to East Los, South Central Watts. The reason I was in student government was because the first African-American woman who was elected student body president was serving at that time, Danette Martin. She lived around the corner from Florence and Normandy. So her first and foremost thought was getting back home because her nieces and nephews were right in the middle of where Reginald Denny was getting his ass whipped. So we knew that we needed to step away from the campus. We needed to make sure everyone got home because the curfew was going to get set in. And then at that point, we just try to figure out what is our role in all this? What is my degree worth if my community is blowing up? So all of us who were SIPA volunteers, who were in Samahan, we went to P-Town, and we were like, make sure everything is safe. We made sure that Goldilocks on Vermont is not dead. Betsy's on Vermont. I need my pundy soft. Right? I wanted to make sure. So what I'm saying, this post-rebellion, because it was a rebellion as far as we were concerned. The media called it a riots, like it was just hysteria. But there was a lot of anger. There's a lot of anger. This is one of the reasons why, because of the experience that I had, I felt I needed to return home. I needed to return home and fight the fight against the conservative majority of my town that used to pull us over before they called it racial profiling. I don't know how many times I got pulled over. I don't know how many parties I went to that got shut down, how many they used. Got shot up by BNG. Okay. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so I think it's important that alongside this scholarship of focusing on hip-hop, we need to really reflect on what was going on concurrently. Oliver mentioned car clubs. Bam talked about the gangs. It's all about this youth experience in America. And I think we need to start opening up the discussion there.
And let me just piggyback on something that's really important to keep bringing up, CPOP. And I'm going to put their business out there, I don't give a shit. CPOP, which is, we called it the hub, the building is sold. That's gone now from our community. And this is what I'm saying about, we've, as people who, come and have these events, these events to bring people to the community, then we leave, and here's this hub that we've labeled it, and now it's gone. That building's been sold. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other stuff behind it, but for the most part, that is now gone. Now you won't be able to tell your youth, oh, well, there's this place in historic Filipino town where, me and DJ Patrick, we had a workshop there. We always came back there. One of my first album release party was at CPOP. My first time I ever rapped on a microphone was in the small room at CPOP, and CPOP was definitely the hub, and now look what's happened. It's gone. I don't mean like it's gone, like it's moving. I mean like the whole thing is disbanded. The whole focus, even in historic Filipino town, is gone. So now what do? You know, and this is what I was talking about, this, you know, let's save this thing, and let's save this thing, and the people are going away. Now this hub that we had in a historic Filipino town is gone. You know, so now where are we going? Now we're a displaced group of youth. There's still the issues and the needs of the people are still present in historic Filipino town, if not more than ever. Like now the gangs in historic Filipino town are bubbling. Like I told you, folks are coming home. You know, so if you drive through historic Filipino town, you'll see stuff that we were seeing in the 90s, Jeff Rocks, Temple Street. Gangs that were gone, like that disappeared, are now coming back, and they're bubbling. Why? And is it coincidence that now SIPA is gone? You know, even SIPA was still even a hub for gang members. Like there would be at any given time counselors from Satanas. Like you'd have SIPA counselors who actually were after they get off work, go stand on the corner of Carondelet and gangbang. You know, like it was at the end of the day still this hub for everybody. It was welcoming to everybody. Now we don't have that.
See, I just want to add too, because in New York it's so different. We had nothing. We had nothing. I was so hungry to learn, and it was hard to find resources to learn about ourselves and our community and our roots. And we were just talking earlier about like Asian American studies in the East Coast and how there's none, you know? And so we, in New York, we really had to rely on each other to be able to learn about each other. And when we lacked educational pieces about learning our history and our roots, there weren't. And even organizations didn't exist. We relied on, there was one organization growing up called Filipino American Human Services, Inc., Incorporated. And they were the only one in Queens that existed, and they're still around to this day, where they were having things. And so we started throwing hip-hop, like B-boy battles there, B-girl battles at Fosse. We call it Fosse for short. That was, I guess you can say, our SIPA. Because it was the only thing that existed. And now it's starting to grow, and then you also have all the grassroots radical Filipino orgs popping off over the last 8, 9, 10 years. But prior to that, we didn't have anything. And it's still a struggle to this day to keep spaces, to find spaces, and to be in community with one another. And the party scene has changed too. Like, it's changed, and as I know of, there hasn't really been a Phil-Am party scene that my sister speaks about in the book on how we came together. And the mobile, that's another thing about what happened in New York City with the club scene. It used to be 18 and over, and when Giuliani became mayor, that changed everything. And when 9/11 happened, that changed the whole club scene and the police system there, and just trying to throw any kind of hip-hop event. And now it's changed so much because of gentrification in New York City and all of these things. It's hard to throw a hip-hop event. No one's throwing hip-hop events in Manhattan anymore. They're throwing it all in Brooklyn. And all those spaces there. So it's changed so much. I don't even know, like I did 4 events in New York City in January, and I don't know the community as well as I used to because I have been living in the West Coast. And to even promote an event and have an event is so different, along with social media. It's just changed so much and so dramatically. But to find spaces was always difficult in New York City. We had to rely on like the Armenian Hall to have an event. We had to rely on the universities to throw parties and to throw hip-hop jams and to come together.
Can I just point something out here? I think it's obvious that folks up here on this panel, not just because we love hip-hop, but it's obviously because we love community. And it's not coincidental that Bambu's a community organizer and Kuttin Kandi's a community organizer. And I'm involved in public service because I'm a community organizer. And when we say Empire of Funk is, it's not something you can really touch, right? But what you can touch is community. You can touch geography, right? Where we go home, where we sleep at night, where we raise our kids. And I'll be honest with you, SIPA is dying because of politics. Because the new mayor cut into their budget. I went to SIPA's 42nd anniversary last night, and they sold the property to a developer. And what they're going to have is affordable housing up top. They won't own, but they will have space at the bottom. So
are they going to keep? Will SIPA still be there?
Yeah, it's going to be there. They're going to raise a building, okay. But even still, their future is tenuous. 42 years though, out of 72, since 1972, They were the ones who were focusing on the area along Temple Street. And even still to this day, after 42 years, it's shaky. So I think what we need to do, if we really love our community, and if we really love the legacy of hip hop, I believe this: hip hop is really about it's about emancipation. It helped facilitate our emancipation, breaking up that colonial mentality, believing in ourselves so we can love ourselves, right? You were talking about there was some convergence of music in the early 70s. They were trying to find a music form to express blackness, that black is beautiful. Well, what hip hop made it possible is that everyone is beautiful. Black is beautiful, brown is beautiful. That we are no longer stepped on, enslaved, oppressed. So now that we're emancipated, what are we going to do? We have a moral obligation to lead our communities and to serve them. Even if the institutions that have been serving aren't doing it as well. Well, then what is our role in that? What is our role in the community? What are we going to use hip-hop for? For something just for self-pleasure, listening in our headphones, not in our heads? Are we going to take off the headphones and get down in our community and serve? That's the question I see.
I think there was a question. Did you have a question? No? We'll have time for one more question. Go ahead.
Oh, me? All right. I would like to thank the panel for keeping it real in the hip hop scene. So then my question is, I guess I personally feel that hip hop is dead without revolutionary politics. And then I want to ask y'all how can Asian American hip hop artists use their position to confront the system and expand young people's political and social consciousness, right? And also, can we move beyond writing our histories in a textbook and politically awaken youth in a movement outside the classroom? Yeah.
Oh, a short question.
I just want to make that real quick response. Well, first of all, and I think this is why this book is really brilliant and important. Hip-hop started with local knowledge, meaning it started with us. And let's not forget, so did Asian American Studies. Why I say that is that I think what this panel should show us, even as we lament the loss of institutions like SIPA, if we are here, it's here. And I think it's a question of then applying that mission in our everyday work. So I think it's really important too. It was young people. It's not experts with doctorates. This is young folk who were 12, 13. We were young. We were young. I was like middle school, 7th and 8th grade. But I think that should be very empowering for you. That